pleasure to welcome Minister Tom Tugendhat, who, as well as being a Home Office Minister, attends Cabinet on behalf of his department, to the show today. Tom, Minister, let me start by asking you, if I may, thank you for coming on the show. What do you think these by-election results say about the state of British politics?
Well, I think they tell us a lot about the Labour Party. I mean, let's be honest. This is a party, as your colleagues were just saying there, who carefully went out and chose a candidate who they thought best represented the leadership, and turns out to have, sadly, a history of anti-Semitism. Now, that's not something that just appears, is it? It's something that you can expect to have seen signs of before. And this is a party as well, the Labour Party, that didn't just select one of these candidates, or rather didn't just try to put one of these candidates into Parliament. They tried to put George Galloway into Parliament on several occasions in the past. And, OK, he's split with them now, but this is Labour's record of promoting and supporting people like him. And the third, of course, is Simon Danczuk, who's got his own tawdry record. And so, there's a pattern, I'm afraid, here of Labour choosing people for their own internal reasons in order to satisfy some sort of, ideological whim within the Labour Party, and ending up with the British people paying for it. In this case, it's Rochdale, and next it might be something else.
But one thing that didn't happen, Minister, is that there wasn't, in fact, our vote, the Conservative Party vote, went down by almost 20%. We were beaten by an independent, David Tully. You would think that, with the Labour Party withdrawing the candidate, there would be a surge in support for the Conservative Party and their candidate. What do you think that 12% of the vote that we got, the Conservatives got, says about the state of the Conservative Party, let alone Labour?
Well, look, I think what it says something that you and I both know, is that we need to have a much better grassroots operation. And in some seats like Rochdale, we haven't invested in that. We haven't had the supporters traditionally. We haven't been able to get out there and make our voice heard. Because as you know very well, in particular in by-elections, but these kind of elections, they're about meeting people. It's not secret. Winning elections isn't hard. It's hard work. You've got to get out. You've got to meet people. You've got to explain what you stand for, and you've got to absolutely make the case. And we didn't have the infrastructure. We didn't have the grassroots in Rochdale, and we've got to make sure we've got that around the country to make the case to everybody, because there's a real choice coming up. And let's be honest, the choice isn't between George Galloway or anybody else and whatever. The real choice is, do you want somebody who can lead the country, can make the differences, can make the decisions to improve this great country of ours? Or do you want somebody who's so obsessed with factional infighting that that you'll end up having people who've backed anti-Semitic causes, be elected to Parliament?
Minister, we may come on to the subject of factional infighting in a moment. Let me ask you, though, is your security minister a hugely important job? I wonder if you've seen the report in today's Telegraph that President Putin, apparently, the Telegraph has seen leaked intelligence documents that shows that President Putin is conspiring around the world to flood Europe with migrants, including the UK, to destabilise the West. What would you say? I wonder if you've seen that report, and do you think it's accurate?
So I have seen that report, and I'm afraid it's something that I've been speaking about for a long time now. The reality is, what we've seen in Central and North Africa is a whole pattern of destabilization by Putin's mercenaries. He calls them the Wagner Group, but they're a bunch of mercenaries who have been stealing property and assets and mining rights and all the rest of it off people in Central and North Africa. They've been aligning themselves with dictators, and they've been trying to open up these migration corridors that lead to human misery, to human trafficking, to slavery, all the way from towns and communities in East and West Africa, all the way through to Libya, and then across the Mediterranean. And that's why it is so important that we fight the horrific traffic in human beings that we're seeing today, which is almost a modern slave trade. It's absolutely vile.
Minister, do you think this is a genuine threat then from Russia? Do you think this is part of the threat that they pose to the United Kingdom?
I think it demonstrates exactly why we're absolutely right to confront Putin, not just in Ukraine, but around the world. In 2022, in August 2022, I went to the border between Lithuania and Latvia and Belarus, in order to go and see the number of people who'd been coming over the from Belarus who'd been flown over from northern Iraq by Russian sponsors in order to be landed in Minsk and pushed over the border into Poland. This is something that they have been doing now for many years. They've weaponized it in different parts of the world, and it looks like they're trying to increase it. What we've got to do, and this is where our role is so important, we've got to bring together not just us and the French over the English Channel. We've got to bring ourselves together with European and wider partners to change the way that we fight immigration crime here in the UK, but also around the world. This isn't just about the Channel. This is about partnerships more deeply.
You've acknowledged that we're vulnerable to this in the UK. It's almost a new front, if we like, that we're learning about in the continuing problems that we're having with Russia. Of course, this wouldn't be a threat if the Prime Minister had delivered on his promise to stop the boats, which he hasn't done. And we learned from figures that came out of your department, the Home Office, yesterday, that we are going to be spending £500 million by 2026 sending people to Rwanda. No one's left yet, but even if that does happen, does that represent good value for the British taxpayer to spend that £500 million on sending people to Rwanda?
I think what represents good value for money is making sure that our borders are secure and our people are safe. And the way that you do that is you deter. And there are various ways in which you can do that, and Rwanda is one of the aspects of those policies. But the fundamental way in which you protect these islands and our people is you make sure that you do what we've done with organizations like NATO, is you push our border as far out as possible. Now, that's why I'm absolutely determined that we've got to do so much more with partners in Europe. Now, we've already started brilliantly with Italy. We've got a really good relationship.
Sorry to interrupt you. Look, I understand that. We're pushing the borders out. I mean, let's see if we can get it to the other side of the English Channel. We're not quite achieving that yet. But just to put that into context in terms of the people coming to the UK, whether driven by Russia or not, this year, according to your own figures from your department, that we will be spending £5 billion on housing asylum seekers. To put that into context, and think about the 2019 general election where people rushed out to vote for levelling up. In this Parliament, when people voted for Boris Johnson and the Conservatives to level up their community, we are spending £4.8 billion across the entire Parliament, 5 years, on levelling up communities, while at the same time, according to your own figures, spending £5 billion every single year housing asylum seekers. How can we say to the British public that housing foreign nationals and asylum seekers is more important than levelling up?
Jake, that's not quite right. And the reason those figures are not quite right is because you're comparing apples with oranges. If you're going to argue with me that we've got too many illegal migrants who've come to the United Kingdom, we need to get returns up, you're absolutely right. And that's exactly what we're doing. And if you look at the policy measures that we've introduced this year, so the further policies that are coming in March, we think that the migrant numbers would be down 300,000 on last year's numbers. Now, that is a hell of a change. It's also true to say that the levelling up numbers that you're counting, those are the levelling up figures that are reserved, as it were, under the levelling up budget. That doesn't include the extraordinary investments that we're making in transport, in education, in many other areas of public government that come under different budgets. So it's not a like for like comparison you're making there.
So, Minister, I understand that, and the reason I'm saying is appreciate there's lots of other money the government's spending. I'm pleased about that. I'm a Conservative MP. But it is quite totemic, isn't it, for people who voted for levelling up that we're spending the same on housing asylum seekers. Look, on the figures, you say they were going to cut, I think, the number of legal migrants by 300,000. There were more figures that came out of the department yesterday saying that we've agreed 62,000 asylum claims last year, highest it's been since 1984. That's part of cutting the backlog, which we said we were going to do. What progress are we making cutting that backlog?
So that backlog has come down massively, and that's been one of the pledges that the Prime Minister made, and James Cleverly has been working on that, as you know. And so that's exactly what has been going on. Now, what we've got to do, though, is not just cut the backlog, is we've got to cut the inflow. And that's where James's work on, the Home Secretary's work on the migrant numbers coming in is so important. Look, when James was Foreign Secretary, as you know, he was working with countries in the region and making sure that we were making a difference in places like North Africa and Italy. Now what we're seeing is the pressure on the UK going down. As you know, the migrant numbers into the UK are down by a third, while they're up by about 80–90% in different parts of Europe. So it demonstrates that actually the measures that we're taking are making a difference. Are they going far enough? No, they're not.
Well,
we need to
no,
make
I
sure
agree. It is
up.
fantastic
And we know
progress
that
to have cut it by a
unless
third. Can I just ask you this specifically on the backlog there, if I may? Quite a
it is progress, though, Jake, and it's
26,000 of
important
the people, 26,000 people in that backlog were removed from the backlog because they've withdrawn their application. 80% of those are just simply people the Home Office has lost track of. They've tried to contact them on 3 occasions. They haven't responded. So the Home Office has withdrawn their application. Where are those 26,000 people?
Well, look, this is exactly where the work on the backlogs is making a difference, because understanding where people are and making sure that we're in control of the situation in the UK is absolutely vital. And that's why we've got to get we've got to get the Home Secretary's, absolutely adamant that we've got to get these things under control. Now, under Suella Braverman and now under James, they've both spent an awful lot of time working on that. You'll understand that as the Security Minister, I've been focused on terrorism and intelligence work. I'm afraid you'll have to ask the Immigration Minister about those areas.
Really importantly, I was in the House of Commons this week where you made a statement about MP security. It's a hugely important issue because attacks on members of Parliament are an attack on democracy. We saw this week protesters going to Keir Starmer's house, Just Stop Oil protesters in that case. What steps is the government taking to keep members of Parliament across the political spectrum safe as they attempt to do their public duties?
So look, there's a range of packages, there's a range of measures that we're taking, and some you'll understand I'm not going to advertise, but we put an extra £31 million into this because what we're trying to do is we're trying to make sure everybody has the ability to have their voice heard, and whoever they choose to represent them, whichever party, whichever member of Parliament they choose, is able to represent their community free from fear and free from intimidation. Now, that's why we're investing in the so-called Opbridger network, which means that police forces will have extra resources to defend elected representatives in their communities. This isn't about the elected representatives. This is about all of us. This is about making sure that our democracy works. And they'll also have extra resources to make sure that where they need extra patrols, they have the ability to organise them. Now, those are hugely important to making sure that our democracy works and that our system of government remains free and fair.
Minister, and I think it's so important, this leading role that you are taking in keeping MPs safe. Just very briefly as a final question, that will extend into the general election. I heard in your announcement that you are providing safety for candidates. So do you think this general election, that the security concerns around MPs and candidates, people who aren't yet elected, are something that the government is going to ensure are protected? Yes, it is. And, candidates need to be willing to come forward. Otherwise, we don't have a proper competition. We don't have, our fellow citizens don't have the right to choose who they want. So we've got to make sure candidates wish to come forward. And that's where, as you know, Jake, as soon as an election is called, none of us are MPs anymore. And so we're all candidates, and we need to make sure that every candidate, whether they're a former MP or not, feels secure in standing up and making the case they wish to make. And that means some of it's physical security, but most of it actually is going to be things like online and making sure that we're trying to keep our online space as sensible as possible, making sure that fakes are identified. We need to have free and robust debate, but we need to make sure that's honest. And that's where we need to be very careful that none of us are spreading disinformation, but we're also looking out for those who may be exploiting gaps in our system. Tom Tugendhat, thank you so much for joining us here on TalkTV, and thank you for updating us, particularly on that hugely important issue of MP security, which we're all rightly concerned about.